Everyone. We're here today for Talk It Up Tuesdays, and I'm super excited about the topic. I'm here with Bakhtawar Yasir, our case manager. But before we dive into our topic, I wanted to share a little bit about the turning point. My PowerPoint is not working today, so I'll just tell you the information verbally. We have a 24-hour hotline. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, staffed by our trained advocates. That number is 1-800-886-7273. And here at the Turning Point, we serve survivors impacted by sexual violence. We provide counseling, advocacy, and education. And we serve survivors in the North Texas region. So welcome, Bakhtawar. I'm so excited to have you. So today I thought we could start off by talking about a report that was recently issued by the CDC, the Youth Risk Behavior Study. They conduct these reports every 2 years, and it's been going on since, I think, the late 1970s. So the trends were released last month in February, and I saw this all over the news sites. But before we start diving into the report, I wonder if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do here at the Turning Point.
Yes, well, my name is Bakhtawar Yasir. I am the case manager and legal advocate, and my main position includes direct clientele services such as follow-ups and intake appointments.
Great. So you see clients both who are survivors for, or you follow up with like for advocacy as
Mhm.
well as on the counseling side. So
Yes.
you hit everybody, right?
Yes.
Great. Well, I thought because this youth risk behavior study came out and it surveyed high school students from across the country to take a look at some of the behaviors so we can notice trends. So it includes things like substance abuse, sexual behavior, health and lifestyle. I think it included like hours of sleep and nutrition. So it takes a look at kind of the whole picture of health for teens, high school age teens. And this has been coming out since the 1970s. And every couple years, they may add some new questions or change it based on what's going on currently. And this year, they released the trends report, and I think the data is coming out later this February. But it covered the period of fall 2021. And that's a pretty significant thing to include because as I'm sure you experience, this is coming right out of COVID.
Yes. Oh, yes, for sure. It was during this time I was about 21, but just to give some background information, I was in school, I was in college, and I actually lived in a dorm. So when COVID happened, they basically told us we have to go home. So I live with my parents, and I do have a younger sister who was about 17, 18 during this time. So when I read this study, I was not only kind of applying it to me and my experiences, but I had someone who literally kind of like fit the demographic, and I'm kind of also seeing it through her lens as well. And yeah, in general, COVID was a time where it happened so randomly, and a lot of the things that we humans kind of need, like the social interaction, the community, going outside of our houses, that was taken away. And there was a huge, you could see that within everybody, but specifically like the teenage population as well. I
Yes.
really, yes. Yeah,
Well,
and
I was just going to say, I think that shows up when we start looking at these
yeah,
results. Like we have to keep that time period in mind because I think it
yes.
has, well, we can see trends. I think that really plays a big
Mhm.
role. But and directly related with mental health, that was one of the huge areas that it found that teens, both male and female across the
Mhm.
spectrum, increases in mental health issues. And so I think probably part of that is directly tied with the situation that the
Oh,
world
yeah.
was in. But unfortunately, while some of the report found that some areas were positive, so risky behavior decreased in some areas, substance abuse actually decreased in some areas, although they'll note that it still is too high. um, some of the issues like mental health, suicide attempts, and suicidal thoughts and feelings, and violence increase, especially sexual violence. And that you can really see these numbers come into play when you look at female versus male students and students that are, they didn't have a question on gender identity, but LGBTQ plus students or students that had a same-sex partner, the impact on mental health and its continuing, the number of students that were feeling sad or depressed or hopeless among those two populations, teenage girls and sort of that overlapping group of LGBTQ plus, it really, really skyrocketed to what many people see as alarming levels.
Yeah, for sure. And I was thinking about both, and like regarding like LGBTQ plus community, I do have friends who fit the community, and I also had multiple friends during this time period where they may not have been like out to their family, or their family knew, or they may not have been accepting. And I knew a lot of people who got their community from school, and they had their friends, and that was almost taken away, and now they're in a home where who they are is being ridiculed every single time. So even just like the feeling of loneliness, feeling alone, and hearing those thoughts again, that can definitely bring up anxiety, depression, and just the experience for mental health as well. And when I'm thinking of the female population as well, it took me a while to think about like the specific statistic that I'm looking at. And for females, it went from 36 to 57, and for men, it went from 21 to 29. And I really actually did sit and think, why is it like that? Because also in school, I took a lot of research classes with datas and studies, and the big thing they would always remind us is that there's always some kind of skewing, or there's like underreporting. And I'm thinking back to my male friends who and what they feel about mental health. And I think in general, from what I've seen here at the Turning Point with our male survivors, but also with my male friends, they all or most of them grew up in environments where if they felt something, if they felt depression or anxiety, they were told, don't cry, you're a man, or that stigma from feeling these emotions. And I was also reflecting back on my college years during this time of this study as well, and I was involved in a mental health organization, and majority of the people who attended were female women. And we did so much we could to push out to the male population, but then makes you wonder, like, kids and young adults and in general, we're like a sponge where we kind of like soak up everything we hear. And sometimes, or a lot of times, even if they are negative, we can still carry those I don't know the particular word, but like those assumptions, and we can even like use it against ourselves, where it's like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, or I shouldn't be getting that. But especially during COVID, when everyone's or majority of people, their anxiety and their mental health kind of declined, with men in particular, I assume this, but it's like, if you always if you don't talk about your mental health, it could get worse. Like, for example, like an event like COVID took place, and because we're not talking about it, it becomes our normal. And even though it should not be normal, that's what we think, that's what we know best of. And if we don't talk about it, we may not even realize like what is wrong and what could be happening. And I am assuming that's what's happening with the statistic as well. Like, there is just underreporting, or they may not know the drastic increase of their mental health, or maybe they felt too scared to disclose that, because all
Yeah.
of these information is like willingness data of people who filled it
Mhm.
out. So that's kind of like what I was thinking as well.
Yeah, that's some great insight into maybe why those numbers for males were still high. I mean, it still
Hmm.
increased from
Yeah.
21% of to 29% of teen boys, but the rate for females jumped from 36% in 2011 up to 57% who stated
Yeah.
they were persistently sad or hopeless. So, I think you're right. Like, gender stereotypes probably do play a role, but I think it's something that regardless of what the reasons are, there's a lot to dig into
Yes.
there. But one of the things that I did want to really bring up, because this plays in so much to our mission, are some of the statistics on sexual violence and sexual assault, or being forced to have sex is how it's written in the survey. So the CDC started asking these questions back in 2017. So they don't have a lot of data. So this is, I guess, only the second time or a third time they would have asked these questions. But they found nearly 15% of teen girls stated that they had been forced to have sex. And that jump was 27% from back in 2019. So that is really something that's important that we take note of as an organizations that's committed to serving survivors, but also working on the violence prevention side. And then under sexual violence, 18% of girls said they had experienced some form of sexual violence, and that was compared to 5% of teen boys during that same period. So regardless of kind of what they were experiencing, we know that this is a really common, a lot more common than we would ever envision for teen girls, I think. And I just wanted to bring that up with you. I know that you serve so many of our clients, and how you see that reflected in the clients that you see.
Yeah, I definitely see that. And with the people I see, that statistic does make sense, unfortunately. And I think in general, there is a stigma that perpetrators are a certain mold, or there are people you see out in public, or maybe people you may not know. But from amount of people I see, the perpetrators for survivors I see are usually either family members or past partners. So it does make sense to me why those statistics are going up, just because everybody's in their home. And I think a lot of times, not only do people not want to talk about the stigma of sexual violence within marriages, relationships, and in families, but yeah, that's a huge issue, and that does make sense, and I do see that within our survivors for sure.
Yeah, and that was something also that noted the sexual violence uh, in sexual being forced to have sex among the LGBTQ plus teens was really high as well. So 20% of LGBTQ plus teens and teens who had any same-sex partner, 37% were more likely to have been forced to have sex. So that's something that is a significant issue to this community that we're seeing right here.
Yeah, for sure. And like also the intersectionality of being at home and also being a member of the LGBTQ community. And typically these people, they are a vulnerable group that perpetrators target.
Mhm.
So unfortunately, it makes me sad that these statistics do make sense, because I do see it within the population that we do serve. And with my position in particular, I do intake appointments. So, and I either do them myself or I assign them to one of our counseling interns, and we ask regarding their story, their counseling needs, and usually the event of the sexual assault or the history of sexual violence does come up, and I do see a lot of cases reflecting this statistic.
Yeah. Oh, that's, it's not anything that we want to hear, that these cases are
Exactly.
going up. And
Yeah.
I know that one other thing that probably plays a part in some areas where COVID restrictions were lifting up at this time, there were a lot of people rushing to be together after having been apart for so long. And we know that in certain situations, the risk of perpetration can be higher, perhaps when substances are involved, or when people are coming together as opposed to being isolated. So but still, these are not statistics that are hopeful in the direction that we're moving. But that's one of the
Mm.
reasons why we're so committed here to addressing this head on, to serving our population, and to preventing violence as a whole, especially sexual violence.
Yeah, and you also make such an excellent point of people just wanting to like get out of the house. Again, this was in 2021 and COVID started like March 2020. So by this, it's been about 9 months of just staying at home. So I was on that same exact boat. I want to get out. I want, and there's like this urgency because you've been stuck in this, like, stuck in a home for so long. And again, like the switch happened so quickly. And especially for like teen girls or just teenagers in general, that's such a big thing to take on, especially when you're in your peak years of like high school and planning college and your young adult years as well.
Yeah. So I wondered if you could speak a little bit between the connection between sexual violence and mental health, because this to me from the report is what we see as a huge intersection. And we know that mental health and sexual violence don't have to be connected, but we do know that there is a huge connection um, between the two. And so I wondered if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yes, there is such a huge connection. When such a traumatic event happens to somebody, it can definitely take a toll on their mental health. I actually did find a statistic by Rain, and it did say regarding women in particular, American women, that 1 in 6 of every American woman has been either a victim to attempted rape or committed rape in their or completed rape in their lifetime. And that's about 15% of completed rapes and 3% of attempted ones. Um, that statistic is very high, but then I also imagine those are just the ones that are reported. And within that same resource, it talked about the aftermath of the PTSD and suicide. 94% of women who are raped experience symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder during the 2 weeks following the rape. And with my position here, I follow up with survivors as soon as they make a hotline call or within the time frame that they do. And majority of the survivors I do follow up with do experience a lot of like mental health obstacles, either due to past experiences or due to the assault itself. Um, in the suicide rates, about 33% of women who are raped contemplate suicide, and 13% of women who are raped attempt suicide. And during the intake appointment, in general, we ask questions centered around them and getting to know them as best as possible. But we also ask, like, have you ever experienced any suicidal thoughts or ideations? Because it is so common, it's very important that we talk about these topics in general. And like with mental health, it's completely intertwined, very
Yeah.
much so. And I think especially like with men, and again with the statistic of being low, I think we do have a good handful of men survivors. And when I do my intake appointment with them, I notice they're usually holding back a lot, but then at the same time I notice that they did not realize how severely a traumatic event like a sexual assault can impact someone's mental health and their mental well-being as well.
Yeah. So just so that we can, for anybody that comes across this video, so the Turning Point, we offer um, medical advocacy, and that's when somebody has been within 120 hours to come get a forensic exam, and then we have support there. We offer advocacy on our phone, so and as well as information and referrals. So if anyone has any questions, if they're experiencing emotional issues from a previous assault, regardless of when it took place, if they're having questions on behalf of a friend, that's a number that anybody can call. And then the other major service that we provide that you deal with when you were talking about your intake appointments are counseling and support groups for survivors. So, and that's where we've had, I think Irene last week talking about trauma therapy for people to reach out and actually help with these sort of
Yeah.
symptoms that they're experiencing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so our counseling here is amazing. We do offer individual and group counseling. It's very important to note that these are all free services if you are a resident in the North Texas area. And we do have a Spanish counselor, a Spanish speaking case manager, and a Spanish speaking counselor as well. So if you need services or counseling services in particular in Spanish, you can get that. But all of our counselors are trained in EMDR, which is a part of trauma informed therapy. We also have group counseling. We have so many amazing different types of groups. The one that I actually lead is called Trauma One-on-One, and we discuss basically the trauma that can come from uh, sexual violence or sexual assault, what that looks like. Every week we talk about different things that we can learn about that's psychoeducational. So the past 2 weeks we talked about boundaries, what they look like, how we can maintain them. And this week we are talking about how to, oh, excuse me. So sorry. But yeah, and this week we're going to talk about how to cope with anxiety and depression. There's also so many other groups that our counselors and our counseling interns also lead together. The only thing about counseling is that we do have a 4 to 6 week wait list for individual counseling. However, something I commonly see is that someone will utilize the groups. They'll be like, okay, I want to do this group in the meantime. But by the time they're off the list, they're like, wait, I actually really like the group. It's such a good support system to have. And speaking on my group, I'm just going to brag about the survivors I work with. Every single one of them, such beautiful human beings, and when I see the support they give each other in the group, it's so crucial to the healing process, knowing you're not alone. There are other people there to support you, and the fact that you can have a conversation with other survivors and they all help each other out. They ask each other for tips like, hey, how did you handle this situation? How do you have any tips for me? I'm still experiencing certain triggers at night, or I'm experiencing nightmares. And it's not just about the psychoeducation we give, but it's the love and support that you get from these groups as well. So that's kind of about the counseling program as well.
Great. And I think you guys have a teen group as well. Is that
Yes.
so?
Yes.
So that's great and directly applies. I think that you mentioned about the support group is the perfect segue, because I did want to mention this youth risk behavior study added several questions this year, but two in particular talked about connectedness. So that idea of feeling connected both at school and in families. And we know, as a prevention factor, a protective factor, we know that as a healing factor, how important connectedness is in mental health, in dealing with sexual trauma, in dealing with all of these aspects. So I think your recommendation and example of the support groups is right on for a great way of moving forward and healing in the process.
Thank you. And to anybody who is listening, if you would like to join a support group, if you give us a call, we can get you signed up with an intake appointment, and you can start as soon as that appointment is over. You can get signed up for groups, you can email the counselors, and you can get started ASAP. But yeah, it's such an amazing resource. And I do see how that does change lives. I see people healing before my eyes every single week, and it's the most beautiful thing, and I'm happy I have the honor to see that happening like right in front of me.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here, Bakhtawar, and we're ending it on a point of hope and a point of healing. So thanks, and we'll be back here again next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.